Former New South Wales Deputy Premier John Barilaro is giving evidence at a New South Wales Upper House inquiry that is set to resume at 1 o'clock this afternoon. This is into his controversial New York posting. Joining us live now is Colleen, an integrity expert and Honorary Professor with the ANU's Australian Studies Institute. Colleen, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. What's been your biggest takeaway from Barilaro's evidence today?
Good morning. Good afternoon, Gab. I think the main message is that integrity in terms of politics in this country is in decline. It probably raises more questions at this stage than have been answered. So it will be important to keep a close eye on the committee and its findings. But there is a much bigger issue here, and that is that the trust deficit between politicians and those who elect them to power is at a dangerous level. We elect politicians to act in the public interest and to put party and personal interests way behind the public interest. And there isn't any evidence that is supporting that emphasis that should be on the public interest. And it's not just confined to New South Wales, although what's been going on there is concerning, but also, I mean, in Victoria, there's been a report issued recently which is absolutely scathing of the culture within the Labor Party in Victoria. There's been issues in Queensland. There's issues at the federal level. I mean, people are really starting to lose faith in our elected representatives, and that's a great concern for a democracy.
Do you think people are losing faith more than ever? Is our trust levels decreasing?
Look, I think they are. It's just also the process by which we even get the candidates to stand for office. How many of them got there because they worked for a politician previously, and then it is as if they're granted the candidature status to stand for seats? How many in the Labor Party come via the union movement? And I go back to, where are the train drivers? Where are the ordinary people out there standing for public office? It just seems to me these days it's just passed on through political parties to people who work for them, and then you have this entrenched culture. So, you've got this party first culture or my ambition first culture that started years before they even came into Parliament.
So what's the solution here? How do we attract the best people?
That's a very interesting question, isn't it? Look, in terms of what's going on, if I can just return to New South Wales, then the Grattan Institute has suggested that we need an independent public appointments commissioner, and I think that might help to bring back trust. In terms of attracting the right people to go into politics, I think it's probably going to happen automatically now because people are disgusted with political parties, and we've only got to look at the federal election to see what is happening with what is being called the Teal movement, plus the increase in independence. I think it's what's actually happening is a turning away from the political parties, and the only people to blame for that is the political parties themselves.
Okay, so you say there's, I suppose, a growing disconnect between people having faith in our politicians. Do you think there is enough of an incentive for ordinary people to go into Parliament?
I think the scrutiny, in all fairness to MPs, the scrutiny under which they go these days is fairly intense. So you will be thinking twice about whether you want to put yourself and perhaps your family through that. But I think they're paid adequately. I don't think that's an issue, but we just have to break this party first and this personal ambition first. I think we need to start re-emphasising the fact that public office is a public trust. And too many of the actions over the last few years don't bear out that fundamental principle. And if we're not very careful, we'll end up with the wrong people in Parliament. And that's happened in other democracies around the world. I'm not going to name them, but it has. And this is not good for democracy itself. It allows people who believe in authoritarianism to point quite easily to, oh, look at the debacle in democracies. Why on earth would we ever go down that path? And that's not a position that we want to be put in. So really, it's a case of lift your game to most, but not all, members of Parliament. I think we've got to be very careful too, not to do the broad brush of like, oh, you know, every politician, we know they're all the same. That's not the truth.
Colleen Lewis, thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure.